So here we go, 24th day of May. Rich Portwood, around 10:30 here in downtown Alton. But he's counting. How are we doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, hanging in there. And some nice weather and a great conversation. We're talking all things Blue Line Tactical Academy. And this is really neat. And Rich, right off the bat, number one, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Had a nice motorcycle ride down here, so perfect.
Perfect segue. How is the ride on the river road in the motorcycle? Because I've never experienced it personally, but so many times I hear people saying almost like that's a ride you have to make even if you don't live around here. You have to come and ride the river road eventually.
I think it's kind of like the Pacific Coast Highway of the Midwest, honestly.
Yeah.
It is.
You're right. And I'm glad to hear you say it because I was going to, but every time I say something like that and make a claim, I have a text line that lets me know that everything I just said was probably not what they agree with. So I'm glad you said it. So that way we're off to a better start.
No, I tell my wife that I want to start like a motorcycle tour company and just have people pay me to take them up and down the river road. She's like, no one's ever going to pay you to do that.
I don't know. I would.
Maybe we need to talk after this.
Maybe so. So, Blue Line Tactical Academy is really unique because right off the bat when I was looking through, I thought, concealed carry. No. Not even close. And Rich, there's so much to talk about, but right off the bat, give us your background if you could, a little bit about your career and whether it's law enforcement, TV, writing.
Okay. I was one of those kids that I always wanted to do something in uniform, join the Army, be a cop. And so getting into law enforcement was really kind of like most kids being able to play center field for the Yankees. It was just one of those things that I truly love doing. But right off the bat, I came to realize I didn't know everything that I needed to know. Mm-hmm. And so I started paying my own way into training. And the more training that I took, the more that I wanted to take more training. It was kind of like, you take one class and it's like, boy, now that I know this, I want to know this, this, and this. And so it just kind of led me down this rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. And started taking as much training as I could get and started competitive shooting and started to have a little bit of success with that. And next thing you know, this gentleman by the name of James Toll contacts me and says, hey, I would love to have you on this new TV show that I'm going to start. And, he's like, hey, would you be willing to be one of my first guests?
Have you ever met this guy before?
No, never have.
So take me through your initial thought when this guy called you before we go any further. Were you thinking, is someone pulling one on me? Like,
I knew that he had an internet show, Trigger Sports America, mm-hmm. and I knew a little bit about him. We'd talked through Facebook, and I don't know. I mean, it was just one of those things I thought, well, this will never appear. Next thing you know, I've got an email with my airline tickets to go to Houston. I'm like, oh, this guy's really serious, So ended up being a guest on 8 seasons of Stop the Threat, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. And it really was.
For people that aren't aware of the show, could you give us a brief synopsis of it? If someone wants to catch it maybe on demand or go, okay, I got to check this guy out.
Sure. I know you can still find them on YouTube, and I think you can even find some on Amazon Prime. But the basic synopsis was they would actually have a team of researchers find different crimes, things where armed citizens used firearms in defense of their person or property. Mm-hmm. And they had actors and stuntmen reenact the crimes, and they had a panel of experts, me included, unfortunately. I don't know as if I would be an expert, but they would have people just kind of pick it apart. What should they have done differently? What could they have done? Could they have had a different piece of equipment? Could they have taken a different approach? Things like that. And it was really neat because I was always the youngest person there. And at the time, I had the least experience.
Wow.
So it was really an honor for me to be picked to do that.
Well, a question for you, too, with you being the youngest guy, on the panel, was there a lot of good learning that you were able to get from some of these guys that were experts coming on and giving their side?
Yeah, and at the same time, there was one guy in particular that I learned hey, this guy's a joke.
Oh, gotcha.
He was one of those that if I were to throw out names, people in the gun community would be like, yeah, I know him. He's had TV shows before. He's written a lot of articles. He's got his own training company. But when you get to sitting down with him, like, this guy has really no true background. You know what I'm saying?
That's interesting.
And so he did a few episodes of the show, and the guy running the show was just like,
get out of here.
We don't need him. But you ended up having guys like Duncan Stewart, who had been a cop out east. And, this guy had run a narcotics unit. He had been part of an anti-terrorist unit out in New York City. Really had a ton of experience. Dan Marcoux had been a cop for about 30 years. Wonderful guy. And then, of course, my buddy Wes Doss, who had been in the military, between active duty, reserves, and National Guard for over 20 years. He had done 10 years as a cop. He had a PhD in sports psychology. And he was also one of the best trainers in the country, So getting the opportunity to be around these people and learn from them, it was amazing,
Well, I'm telling you what, right off the bat, when we were talking, just to picture this a little bit like Sophia Golden Girls, we were talking, and I remember you mentioned it on the phone, and I thought, oh, that's cool. Well, then you mentioned it today, and my eyes it's like, wait a minute. You were, a part of the show, and to be a part of a cast and crew with experience to kind of get some own, learning going on your own. And now, did people agree with you a lot of the times on this?
Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. I found that Duncan and Wes and I usually had the same thoughts, which is kind of why we became so close. But every now and then, you would get audience members or viewers writing in and saying, hey, you're an idiot.
Just like here.
Yeah. And there were times that I really wanted to respond, hey, you don't realize that this, as far as us, is live, so to speak. We're seeing these scenarios for the very first time, and James looks at you and, what do you think? And you have to come up with an answer real quick.
Right. Well, and too, it's not like you can, and I'm sure it wasn't like this, where you can go, all right, hey, let's pause here. Let's show this to you a second time, but let's act like it's the first time, and let's just start. That probably doesn't happen. You're ready to go at all times.
Yeah.
Man, that's so cool. And with that, your career in law enforcement, take us through a little bit more of that.
I was very, very fortunate, that I spent 19 years as a cop. Yeah. And, I got to do a lot of cool stuff, and I enjoyed every second of it. And if it wouldn't have been for cancer, I'd still be doing it, I think it's the greatest job out there. I'm really, really sorry that so many people are shying away from it, because I hear a lot of kids say, well, I was thinking about being a cop, but, the way things are, I don't really want to do it. And I tell them, this is the greatest job on earth. You're going to be able to truly help people.
Right.
If you're doing it right, yeah, you're going to make people mad. There are going to be people that don't like you, and that's fine, But at the end of the day, you're going to help more people than you can ever imagine.
Well, and that's true. And I always, I'm under the impression too that a lot of times the big four, networks like to make a, and there's always things to report on, but sometimes it, I think it puts more fear into us than we need to have, and maybe so with this. I'm not saying it is, but. It's a good point. And now with that, we were talking, and if it's okay with you, we were talking about how, with your conversations with other, cancer patients, and how there's a chance that a lot of them go back to their career. And how with this, how are you able to adapt that going, well, it's this chapter's, pretty much, is it pretty much closed at this point?
It seems like it, yeah. It was just kind of a fluke that they ever found the cancer. And I'm very, very glad that they did. And I'm glad that they found it when they did. But, the surgery or surgeries and all the chemo, you run the risk of side effects. And unfortunately, I had some side effects. And that forced me to take a retirement out of the police department and not let me go back. But, I like I was telling you before, I feel like the physical portion last year was the easiest part, because, I had it in my mind, this is just another fight. You know, I'm going to win this. I'm not going to let it be down. But at the same time, you get to a point where, okay, I'm through all this. Now I'm no longer a cop.
Yeah.
Cancer took this from me.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of your identity. Your job, your career. That's
you live and breathe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're kind of forced to start over. I just turned 48 years old, and I never expected at the age of 48 to be starting over, trying to figure out what am I going to do with the rest of my life. And, that plays a big part with this. I had gone to work for Wes Doss a few years ago, working for his company, Kyber Interactive Associates, and training police and military all across the United States.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful opportunity. And I can't think of anybody better to learn from than Wes. But Wes has since passed on, and I decided I would start my own. I got married to a young lady who has 4 children. And so it's kind of important for me that I wanted to stay a little bit more local. And so I started this business in the hopes that, I could train local police, local armed citizens, just kind of pass on a lot of what I've learned.
Well, I'm telling you what, I hate to stop this while the going's getting good, but this might be the most seamless conversation I think we've ever had, because that's what I was going to ask you about next, because I'm just hearing all your background and going, wow, for somebody to do all these things and not come in here with 2 chips and a block on your shoulder is really cool. And I mean,
I appreciate that.
Well, and I always tell people, it's like you can always tell the successful folks are the ones that have done cool things, because they don't have to broadcast it to you every second of the day. They are who they are. They move on. And with that being said, I am really a fan of this. I mean, Blue Line Tactical Academy, take me through this. So when did you officially launch the business?
Actually, a couple of years ago.
Okay.
The first year was going well in the sense that I was building it up. One of the things I really like to do is church security programs.
Well, that's a big thing, especially in us. We just had one in North County where they had to talk some potential robbers, down and hold them until the police showed up.
Yeah.
That's to me, I think that's very important. So you start with that.
Yeah, I like to go in and just kind of tell them how they set it up, how they should deploy everybody, and how to approach people. I want to help them as much as I can. Keep that because I feel like that's part of your ministry. This past weekend I actually went down to, or I guess the weekend before, I went down to a church and taught de-escalation to a church security team. Because, and you might think, well, gosh, this is a gun guy. Why is he teaching de-escalation? Because I'm really proud of the fact that during 19 years of law enforcement, I never had to shoot anybody.
Really? And not being funny about that, but that's actually really impressive you're in high stress situations pretty much all the time in your position.
I feel like that is the goal, is that you are trying to solve as many situations as you can without shooting. That's not always true by any means.
Right.
But, if you can do that, then you have succeeded.
Absolutely.
And again, I feel like with a church security group, when you are de-escalating a situation, that's part of your ministry. Because I always tell people, chances are you're not going to have a mass shooter coming to your church, but you're probably going to encounter somebody that is drunk out in your parking lot, or somebody who's going through marital issues that spills over into your congregation or your parking lot. And so when you go to approach them, what do we tell people, when they're having marital problems? Hey, I'm going to pray for you. You ought to come to church, right?
Right.
But at the same time, we're also going to say, well, you guys are fighting. Maybe you ought to stay out. How you approach them is going to be important, as far as your ministry. You might be able to reach them,
Well, and with that being said, you segued it already there. First impressions, seem to be, especially in those de-escalations, everything. And if, I'm sure what you teach is, that first impression with somebody that's, potentially combative or causing some issues. How important is that, first 10 seconds of the, interaction?
Oh, it's incredible, and I'm sure that I know that I have failed that on many occasions through my career. I have failed to do that. But it also allowed me the opportunity to learn. You know, I look back at things, and I can think of certain situations where I failed to do the right thing, and you know, probably made someone more mad than I should have, or I left a bad impression on them. And I wanted to learn from that, you know, because that's not what I wanted, you know, and that's not the kind of impression that I wanted to leave. And so I think I got better and better at that as I got through my career.
That's just really insightful to hear too, because you know it's not very often that somebody admits, made a few mistakes around the bend, or maybe should have done this better. And it's good to know, because that's all part of this learning process. And to me, especially in these classes, because this is not, if you're taking these, you're taking them for a reason. Yeah. And I would much rather learn from somebody who's calm, cool, and collected and can tell you, hey, I've learned from this because here's something maybe I done, or maybe here's something that I could have done a little bit differently. Yeah. How much of that do you experience in these classes that you teach with using your own personal experiences, which you have quite a few, to kind of showcase and maybe enhance what you're teaching?
I think it comes into every class, I like to think that what separates me from other people is how I put things into context. I've got 17 different instructor certifications.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah.
I mean,
where do we start?
I can teach you anything from flashbangs to CQB to active shooter response to rifles to handguns, whatever,
Wow.
But the thing about it is, I've got the qualifications and certifications that you can take me and I can train any SWAT team in America. I'm qualified to do that. But if I am teaching you, do you need the same tactics?
No.
Not
even close, I would say.
Because, in context, you're not going to have the same equipment.
No.
Not the same situations. So why should I train you, because that's the big thing. Everybody wants to sign up for, hey, this guy was in Delta Force. This guy was a Navy SEAL. Well, you're not going to be using that stuff.
Exactly.
I remember several years ago, I'm not going to use the guy's name because I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, but signed up for a vehicle engagement class with an ex-Delta guy. And one of the most intense people I've ever met in my life. Wonderful instructor. I got so much out of the class. But when we start doing all of these vehicle takedown techniques, he says, this is the way we did it when I was in Bosnia looking for war criminals. And he's explaining this, and I raised my hand and I said, hey, I don't think I can do this because I'm violating, like 4 or 5 different policies.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm violating Illinois law when I do some of this stuff. I can't do it. So you really have to take things in context. And I really try, I've got a class next month.
Right.
VIP concealed carry is what I call it. And basically what it is I'm taking executive protection type tactics and techniques that the Secret Service and all these bodyguards use, and I'm applying it to someone like you who might get a concealed carry, and you're out with your significant other, you're out with your kids, mom, dad, whatever. How are you going to protect them? Now, that's the idea.
And now, see, that's what I appreciate about this, because you're right. I'm not going to have an assault rifle or whatever, getting out of an armored vehicle, kicking a door in. It's going to be a real world situation. If, God forbid, I'm downtown St. Louis and something happens and there's a mass incident, to be able to say, all right, A, B, C, here's the steps we got to do to keep, mom, dad, grandpa, girlfriend, whoever safe. That's what I'd rather take than, oh, well, if you're ever in, the hills of, I don't know, Sudan, and you go out there, here's how you handle stuff. You're right. You're absolutely right in training law enforcement. You can violate how many policies, state law, if you aren't getting taught the correct procedure.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's fascinating. And I mean, really fascinating. So with that being said, what time is that class and what day is that on?
You'd ask me that. I want to say, it's like June 17th. I think we start at 8 a.m.
I'm pulling it up. It is. Look
Okay.
at that.
Gosh.
I am on BlueLineTacticalAcademy.com. You guys can follow along at home. And now this is great. 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Otter Creek Hunting Club, which I used to frequent quite a bit. And
Great place.
Great location. Now, does it make it easier to do your classes in a location like that?
It really does, and I'm really grateful that Joe out there at Otter Creek is willing to host me. One of the struggles I have had business wise is I don't own a range. I'm a poor father of four.
Right.
We can't afford to go out and buy a range. And, hopefully there's some range owners who are listening to this, because I really feel like what I can do is I can bring classes to you.
Yeah. And help grow their business too.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there are a lot of rangers that they don't see that. They look at me as competition. And I'm not sure why, because my goal is I want you, if you're a concealed carry holder,
right,
I want you to be as well trained as possible. I'm not charging a ton of money for these classes.
No.
So if I can come into a range, and I split the fees with you, and I can bring in some new shooters, then that's great. It's going to boost your business. They might be coming in and buying ammo and holsters and everything from you. They don't really see that. So that's been kind of a hard sell.
Well, and too, not to keep going back to it, but you just mentioned something about the concealed carry. I just thought about something. If something ever happened to where, and we've seen, some situations throughout the country where somebody's defending themselves or defending the public, and they have to take action and they have to take matters. And with that, I would much rather be confident in knowing that the majority of people that are, concealed carry holders are trained the right way in certain situations, instead of not being prepared for that. And then all of a sudden, situation gets tense. Mm-hmm. It takes, unless you're in that situation before, you don't know how you're going to react.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just kind of what I think about whenever you mention that. I mean, it's a great point.
Yeah.
And with that, so this is limited to 10 students, this class, which is on June the 17th at 8 a.m. at Otter Creek Hunting Club. You're going to be there all day, but you're going to be learning all day from really one, in my opinion, not to patronize you, but one of the best in the area, because you've had a lot of experience, a lot of background in this, a lot of different outlets utilizing your knowledge. And I mean, think about this. $200 a person for an all-day class. Good luck finding any other class for that price. I mean, for me personally, if I went to a coach's clinic, that'd be at least $800 right off the bat,
Usually, yeah.
Right. So is there a reason you keep things low? Is it just to kind of make sure that you're making this affordable for everybody?
That was the whole idea.
Really?
Yeah, because whenever I was going to all these classes myself and paying my own way, I was scraping money together to go to some of them.
I could imagine.
I'm using my vacation time, and I want people to be able to afford this. Just this past weekend, I saw some people that they were getting their concealed carry license. They had never shot a gun before. So they really need to go beyond that, and I hope they see that.
Yes.
That, hey, yeah, you've got this license, and I go back to this analogy all the time that, when you were 15 years old, you were taking driver's ed, right?
Right.
And they teach you the rules of the road. They teach you, hey, you've got to stay on this side of the road. Don't cross over to that left lane, unless you're passing, right?
Right.
Yeah, and follow the rules.
That's it.
Yeah. And then, hey, can you show us how to park? Can you drive and stop at this stop sign? Well, that's kind of what you're doing, right?
Right.
So they hand you a driver's license saying you're certified now to drive. But when you get the driver's license, are you prepared to go drive in the Indianapolis 500?
No. I'm
No.
not prepared to drive 270 when I first get my license. I mean, let's be real here. Speaking of Indianapolis 500,
Yeah. So, I mean, with the concealed carry, all they're doing is telling you, hey, here are the parts of the gun. Here's how to clean it. Here's where you can take this gun. Here's where you can't. Mm-hmm. Now, we're going to have you shoot 30 rounds. Okay, you're demonstrating that you can hit this target. Now, here's your license.
Right.
Okay, so now you need some training in order to really know what you're doing.
I completely agree, because to me, and this is just me and I don't have a CCL yet or anything like that, but when I do, because my plan is to get one, if I do, I've never experienced somebody that's wanting to potentially really harm me or in a very escalated situation. I don't know how I'd handle that.
Yeah.
I don't have the training for that. So immediately my mind, when you and I talked on the phone, went, this is critical. Yeah. Because unless you've been in the situation, you really won't have any idea on how to act. Is that kind of what your thoughts are too?
Yeah. And I'm just going to plug somebody real
absolutely.
quick. But, my friend Mark Magus,
he's been on the show
has
before.
Trigger Talent. Does an amazing job of covering all the laws and stuff. And he did a wonderful job of getting those first-time shooters, to pass that qualification. Yeah. So I sent my wife to him, and I trust him 100%,
My parents used Mark for theirs, and nothing but great things. And my dad went hunting before, but my mom, well, I was a little scared. I went, how is this going to go? Mark took care of her. But you're right. And there are folks, but like you said, just to get that actual additional training where you're learning these real life scenarios potentially and how to kind of combat them. I mean, I'm all for this, and I think we all should be. And with that being said, this is really easy online, guys. I'm on the website now, BalloonLineTacticalAcademy.com. All you do is you go click upcoming classes, book course. I'm doing this live for you. And it takes you right there. You just check out. Powered by Square, you fill out the form and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, you can't ask for anything easier.
I've tried to make it easy anyhow,
I mean, seriously, this is fantastic. So I want to ask you about a few of your other upcoming classes, though, because if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the VIP concealed carry. This is about, protecting mom, dad, grandma, whoever in a situation where you need to protect. But also, I mean, I'm looking through here. You got Gunfighter 101, Tactical Shotgun coming up. Take us through these two courses.
Gunfighter 101 is kind of unique in the sense that I've got all these Glock lookalikes that fire paint pellets. And so you show up, and we're going to do a safety check, make sure that nobody's got any guns, knives, nuclear weapons, anything like that on them. And I've got the holsters, the guns, the protective masks, and I'm going to put you through scenarios and drills where you're basically getting into gunfights for 8 hours. And what better experience can you have?
No kidding. I'm right there. I didn't realize that's what it was. I mean, that is really hands-on experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I know a lot of people talk about competitive shooting. And, several years ago, I was at an IDPA match, and there was a first-time female shooter, and the range officer was saying, hey, this is what you would do in a real gunfight. And I'm like, no, it isn't. Come on now. Don't confuse the two. And I think a lot of people start looking at IDPA or USPSA as training. But think about it. You're waiting for a buzzer to tell you to draw and shoot. Shooter, stand by, and, you hear that beep. With this, okay, I'm going to tell you, if you're the bad guy, hey, you draw when you feel like it. When you decide that you're going to draw and shoot our good guy, do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell the good guy, hey, you can't legally draw until he threatens you.
Gotcha.
So, it's not like I'm blowing a whistle and the good guy gets to shoot the bad guy.
Like dodgeball, you're just running into the middle. This is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be able to say, okay, well, I saw this, and this is what this guy did, and I can legally say that I'm justified in doing what I did. And we're going to put you through a lot of different scenarios.
Well, and not to cut you off, but when you said that, my correlation, because I'm a sports guy, is, I always tell people you can take 2,000 penalty kicks in practice. Doesn't mean you're going to make one in a game, because I used to do that all the time. Couldn't hit a penalty kick, but could score from 40 yards out. Well, if you're just going up every day, hitting the same shot in that same spot, and, like the buzzer going off, you're not getting prepared for that real game experience with all the fans behind you and crowd and everything else. I mean, you're absolutely right. And so this is limited to 10 too, and this is using T4E training pistols. And another easy way to sign up for another class is just, I love this. Book this course. You click on upcoming classes, and if you find one that it's interesting to you, find one we're talking about, you select it, you go to the checkout, and you're good to go. I just can't get over this. that leads me into tactical shotgun because I am very fascinated by this.
Well, we live in a communist state now, so to speak.
Yeah.
That Illinois is trying to prevent us from exercising all our Second Amendment rights and saying, hey, the AR-15 is bad.
Right.
Well,
what are your thoughts on this seriously? Because I'm not an expert in this. I listen to the talking heads, and that gets me nowhere.
I mean, it's just a tool. It's an inanimate object. How can we keep blaming inanimate objects for things that people do?
Yep.
We need to put the blame where it really lies, and that's the people.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. And with this, so tactical shotgun, I mean, is this just because we know what's impending? Hopefully, a lot of people's perceptions that it gets kind of thrown out of here and the Supreme Court kicks it down, but we got a long ways to go for that, it looks like. Yeah. So this tactical shotgun, take me through this. So this is a good way to learn about a tactical piece of equipment and not just your over-under, I'm assuming, huh?
Yeah, because, if you've got a pump shotgun in your house, I think people underestimate just how devastating and effective a piece of equipment that really is.
Can I ask you something? I keep cutting you off, but this is really fascinating to me, man. I mean, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I have heard before that sometimes, there's been situations of a home invasion in progress or, a burglary or something. And I was seeing that there was reports of criminals when they hear that shotgun click on the pump, they run out faster out of the door than if they heard anything else. Yeah. Is that true? I mean,
I've never talked to anybody who is committing a burglary
that's true.
They were just like, I got to get out of here.
I heard the pump and I was gone. But I've heard that. I just didn't know. It's
such a distinct sound. I would think that somewhere in the dark, if you're breaking into someone's house and you hear that, it's like, I picked the wrong house. It's time for me to go.
The F around to find out ratio was very strong there, you know?
Yeah.
So take me through this because you're right. I mean, you can get a lot of things accomplished with a shotgun, huh?
Yeah. You've got such a broad variety of ammunition for this. Anything from beanbag rounds, to birdshot, to slugs, to buckshot. There's so many different rounds you can throw in there. Rubber pellets, whatever. Mm-hmm. But the big challenge, I think, for a lot of people is the recoil, handling the recoil of the 12-gauge shotgun, and keeping the thing loaded. Because you are limited. It's not like you've got a 30-round magazine that you're inserting into the AR. You might have a shotgun that only holds 3 rounds. Maybe you've got an extended magazine tube where you've got 5, but it's a much smaller capacity. And so that's the main focus. We are going to try to get you to handle the recoil and be able to manipulate this gun and keep it loaded.
Now that's actually really, to me, I think that's really, really cool. I hate to use that word, but I mean, that's something that's really critical. And that would be something that I want to learn about because, I mean, to be able to manage that would be pretty critical right now, especially when there's there's all this going on and who knows what's happening tomorrow, let alone a year from now, when it comes to this.
And I think... unfortunately, everybody looks at the black rifle as being, oh man, that's just so cool, and I'm going to spend all this money on it. I'm going to spend all the money on the latest gadgets for it. Well, okay, but how about learning how to use that? And you've got this shotgun that it is so versatile, with all these different types of munitions. Why don't you learn how to use that?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And, Rich, I hate to tell you this, but we're almost out of time. Remember I told you 15 minutes? 35 minutes later. And I've loved every bit of this because I think this is really fascinating. And I highly encourage you guys to please check out BlueLineTacticalAcademy.com. Is there anything else that we're forgetting upcoming classes? We got time if we need to get them out.
I've got one other class. It is about snub-nose revolvers.
Oh!
Little 5-shot revolvers. And I think I'm one of the handful of guys in America that still teach anything like this. I love them. I think they're a lot of fun. And, I don't expect to get a lot of turnout for this. So if I could get like 2 or 3 people to sign up for this, I would feel like it's a great success.
Now, can I ask you something? Just because now that you brought this up, okay, I was watching Godfather the other day, okay? And, of course, the iconic scene where they're putting the gun behind the toilet, and all that. Are those actually traceable, untraceable at the time? How did they say that? I hate to just throw these weird things out at you, but I'm a weird guy sometimes.
Well, years and years ago, they never put serial numbers on guns.
Really?
Yeah, years and years ago, they did not. So if you have a revolver that is just, an antique, you might not have any sort of serial number on them. So it might not be traceable. And maybe that's the wrong thing to say. But most people are not looking for a 100-year-old gun either.
Well, that's true. And all I can tell you is this: I think I have thrown every weird question I could throw out at you because I find all this really fascinating because. To me, I'm always about preventative maintenance, and I don't want that to sound bad, but I'd rather know how to do something in case something happens than go, uh-oh, something's happening. What do I do?
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's why these classes are really, really beneficial. And for all of you guys that are just tuning in, well, you're tuning in at the wrong time because we're out of time. We got to go. But for all updates on Blue Line Tactical Academy, BlueLineTacticalAcademy.com. Rich Portwood, anything else?
I really appreciate you having me on, and hopefully I'll see everybody out on the range.
Absolutely. We are out of time. Wednesday hump day over with as far as I'm concerned. Summer's starting for a lot of kids today, and that's really exciting. But our daily show on Thursday is too. I'll see you tomorrow live at 9. On that note, have a great day and try your best to stay out of jail.